earlier than last time. So let's start talking about flow. Last time we gave a couple different examples uh, about flow, different things we could do to increase flow. So let's start off with that again. Just as a reminder, these are the couple key things that you need to have to get into a flow experience or a flow state. The activity needs to be intrinsically rewarding for you. You need to have clear goals and progress. So with that, you need really clear and immediate feedback to tell you about your progress in that task. Match your challenge and skill level, and this is one of the hardest ones that we talked about, is to make sure your skill levels and the challenge levels were matched, and then focusing on the present moment. So let's give it a couple more examples on things that you could get into a flow state for. So for those of you in the class right now, can you each think of one example of something that you could get into a flow state with? So just type it out in the meeting chat. This could be something that you have been in a state of flow before, or maybe you'd want to get into a state of flow with, or something that you think you could possibly get into a state of flow with. And we'll go through those different points and see which ones fit well. All right, I don't see any comments coming in. That might be just delay or problems with the app. I'll give one example that I think I mentioned at the very end of class last time, is that one way that you can get into a flow state, and is often tried to program to get into a flow state, is video games. So especially video games where you play online with other people. Oftentimes these games try to get you into a flow state. So first off, they try to make the game intrinsically rewarding. They give you rewards in game. Hopefully it's fun for you. That's why they make the game, is to be fun so that they can sell it. But also they try to get you into a flow state generally so that they can sell more of something in the game or keep you playing longer, so that they increase your interest in maybe that type of game, so the next time they come out with a game, they'll do this more. So one of the games types that I've played before that does this a lot are first person shooters. So if you think of things like Halo, what are we on now? The Halo that's coming out later this year is like Halo 6. So we've had very many games in the Halo series that are first person shooters, and each one of them, as you look back to the history, around like Halo 3, they really started to do this with the matchmaking. Other games too, Destiny is another first-person shooter. I haven't actually played that one, but there's other first-person shooters that do this, that have ranking lists and try to match you up. So hopefully their game is already intrinsically rewarding, or you wouldn't be playing it. So they need to design the game to be rewarding in and of itself. And then they try to match your challenge and skills. So they try to rank you against other people who are at about your same level. So they'll put you in matches that are a little hard for you or a little bit easier for you. So they try to keep you in this flow channel of challenge level and skill level. They try to give you clear and immediate feedback. In a first-person shooter, if you don't play well, you die and you respawn. So that's pretty immediate feedback. They might give you awards for getting a kill streak of 3 kills or 4 kills or 5 kills and whatnot. For getting headshots, they might give you more points. So this is clear immediate feedback, clear goals and progress if you're playing like Capture the Flag. If you've never ever played a first-person shooter or seen one, this example might not make any sense. But you have clear goals and progress. You can see numbers and like who's ranked where, who has the most points, who has the most kills. And it's keeping you with this focus on the present moment. There's not a lot they can do with that, because obviously if your house starts burning around you, you should probably turn your focus on that versus a video game. But a lot of what these games do is try to give you those clear goals, give you a sense of your progress, give you clear and immediate feedback, and match you at a challenge and skill level to keep you coming back playing, so you'll buy the next game, so you'll buy things in game now to get you to a higher level. Even games, mobile games do this too, like Candy Crush tries to match your skill level, tries to give you clear and immediate feedback, and tries to get you to buy like the extra little like $1 special thing to make all the candies explode or whatever, so you can get past a hard level. So flow is at the core of a lot of video games, actually, trying to get people in flow to sell more games, essentially. So Mackie makes a comment, something that you could get into a flow state with is a board game called Starcadia Quest. And I don't actually know that one. Mackie, would you mind describing the game a little bit and how it meets these aspects of flow and things that maybe you could even do to get more clear feedback or match the challenge and skill level? Would you mind sharing a little bit about that?
Sure thing. So Starcadia Quest is, it was actually a game that my brother-in-law introduced me to, but it's a board game where every time you set up the game, the board map is completely random. And well, not completely random, but each time it's different. You almost never have the exact same map more than once. And you have different goals. So basically you're a two-man squad, and it's you and I think it's up to 6 other people, so 6 people in total. And you have 2 little guys that are basically like astronauts running around this spaceship. Thus the name's like Starcadia. But you have monsters in the ship that you and all the other players are fighting against. But at the same time, you're also fighting the other players to reach certain objectives, certain goals. And so there's 3 different goals between you and the other players, but then there's like 5 other objectives between you and the monsters. And so there's multiple different objectives you could go for, different avenues you can go with the game, different. Yeah, exactly. And so that's kind of where it appeals to me, where it's always different. And like with the other people, you get different people that are above your skill level or below your skill level or right around the same spot you are. And you've got multiple different objectives, multiple rewards that you get, different rewards for each goal that you achieve. So.
Really great example there, and it sounds like a game that I might check out to see if someone that we should get. So yeah, really great example there, with especially with having so many different goals. That gives you a lot of sense of that clear and immediate feedback and where your progress is. So this, I think, goes well into our discussion later that we'll probably get to in the beginning of chapter 12, well, the end of chapter 11, about careers and work as well. Some of those aspects that you described there that make the game more likely to get you into a flow state are also things that can help you get more into a flow state in a kind of work context as well. So really great example there. Thank you for sharing that. So you can think in your own life of things that you could do to maybe modify activities. Maybe you've been in flow when you've been playing a game, or you've been in flow when you've been doing art or playing music or writing or something like that. Maybe there's been some activity that you have been in flow in the past with, but that you don't tend to always get into flow, and that tends to be the case. Getting all of these aspects, meeting all these prerequisites for flow can be challenging. So even though I have been in flow when writing or when teaching or when riding my motorcycle, it doesn't always happen. And so you have to try and change things about how you're doing that if you want to get into that state of flow. And one good thing about flow is that it's something that, well, you're able to control these kind of activities. It doesn't just happen. It's because you have clear goals and progress, immediate feedback, you're matching that challenge and skill. Some things are easier or harder to do all those with, but it's something that you could do in, say, your work. If there's tasks at your work that you feel you would like to get into flow with, look at these prerequisites and think about, well, how could I get to that point? How could I modify this activity so I'm getting more immediate feedback? How could I match my challenge to my skill level? Things like that. So you can work to have that kind of optimal experience. Csikszentmihalyi, Dr. Csikszentmihalyi from that video we watched last time talked about it as an optimal experience. It's something people enjoy having. This is one of the things that motivates people to do those same activities again so they can get that same feeling again. So this is something you could work on to be in flow quite often if it's something that you wanted to. Yeah. So thanks for those examples. As we jump to career, let's talk about how ideas about career change throughout childhood as well. So in childhood, oftentimes career ideas are really idealistic. So you might ask a child what they want to be when they grow up and why, and oftentimes they're really idealistic. In adolescence, not surprisingly, it's often part of their search for identity. So with that, they're exploring different kinds of career options, different ideas of what they would want to do in their career. And then in early adulthood, oftentimes this is a first major decision for a major in college or a specialization, like a first long-term career. You might even still be going through the emerging adulthood phase where you're trying out a couple different things to try and settle on something. But that often happens in early adulthood. And then as we get into middle adulthood, generally you're working in a field, you're trying to advance in that field. Maybe you're trying to move up the ranks or move to a different or a similar, higher paying position at another company, things like that. Oftentimes also in middle adulthood, and we'll talk about this when we get to middle adulthood. Middle adulthood oftentimes is when a career change happens too. So it more often happens towards the middle or later of middle adulthood. Sometimes it's motivated by being fired from your job, but other times it's essentially they've gotten bored of that job. So in the past, we've kind of described this as fitting in with, say, a midlife crisis, but it actually is a pretty common phenomenon and not a crisis-y thing, other than if you're losing income for a while, that can be really challenging. But I guess the main point here, and we'll talk about this again in middle adulthood, most people don't have a midlife crisis, so it's not really a thing that happens. But people do, it's pretty common to change a career towards the middle or end of middle adulthood. All right, so with this, let's talk about also finding purpose. So flow is a singular experience. You have maybe 2 hours or 3 hours that you are in flow while doing a specific task. Purpose is a little different. So a purpose, this is the academic definition, and we'll break it down to make it a little more palatable. Sorry, I just accidentally hung up rather than click to look at how many students were in the class right now. So can everybody hear me? Is the audio still good?
Yep.
All right, thank you. I wonder if I can change where my buttons are, because I've done that a couple times. Go to click show participants and I accidentally click hang up. Glad I'm back and things are working though. So purpose in life. I guess I need to share my screen again since I had hung up. All right, so purpose in life is a stable and generalized intention that's meaningful to yourself, but also leads to some productive engagement with the world beyond yourself. So these words that are highlighted, there's other synonyms for them, and those are things like goals, meaning, and self-transcendence. So purpose in life is something that you have long-term as well as short-term goals around. These are meaningful things to you, and it's self-transcendent, meaning it's beyond yourself. So we were just talking about careers. An example of a career that someone might find purposeful is as a veterinarian. So it's not the only one, obviously, but just kind of a prototypical example. So with that, in training to be a veterinarian or being a veterinarian, you have these long-term goals. You need to go through school, you need to get training. I don't know, they probably do like some apprenticeship or like residency training as well. It's meaningful to you. Maybe you're doing it because you want to help animals, and that's clearly beyond yourself. While it's something that you enjoy yourself to help animals, it's also beyond yourself in that it is helping other animals and the people with the animals, things like that. So hopefully that makes it a little more clear. So other examples, so career is one area where people commonly find purpose. There's a couple others. One is family is another area people commonly find purpose. So let's go through goals, meaning, and self-transcendence there. When you have a family and you find purpose in your family, you'll probably have long and short-term goals to be there for your family, to to maintain and build relationships with that family. So that's probably, if it's a purpose for you, it's meaningful, so that those actions in and of themselves are meaningful to you. You like the day-to-day of being with your family, and you have these long-term goals. Maybe your short-term goal is, well, this month we should do some fun family activity for spring break or something like that. Or maybe next month, because it's almost April now, as an example. And so that's beyond yourself. While it's meaningful and pleasant to you, your goals and the things that you're doing are also for other people. It's beyond you. It's self-transcended. So it transcends to other people. So you help your parents or your siblings or your children, and you're supporting them and you're working together with them. If that's something you find purpose in, these might be some of the day-to-day things you do. So careers are often a place where we find purpose. Family is often a place we find purpose. A lot of people find purpose in their religion, and that can be self-transcendent for like helping and serving other people. Also, definitionally, for religious purposes, a transcendent thing for a deity is considered also self-transcendent, even if it's not actually impacting humans or like animals or things or like the world, because that's beyond yourself. A deity would be beyond yourself. So career, family, religion, hobbies are also a place where people commonly do a hobby because it's purposeful to them. So if they find purpose in this example could be both career as well as hobby, but say creating music. You could find purpose in creating music. And giving art to people, providing someone with a meaningful experience that's beyond yourself. So hopefully these examples make it clear what I mean by purpose. So anyone's purpose is really individual. So I've got a couple different purposes. One of my purposes is to like teach and help people. And so one way I do that is by teaching classes like this. Another way I do that is by creating tools to help people as well become more pro-social, things like that with my research. Another one of my purposes is with my family. So a lot of things with my family I find really meaningful. I set goals around that. It's for my family as well. So those are some examples of purpose. Hopefully you can see in your own life things that you might want to be purposeful around. And maybe there's one aspect of these, the goals. Maybe you need to set more goals around it, short and long term. It should already probably, usually meaning is like the first thing, and then the goals and self-transcendence come after it, but it doesn't have to be. Just in the trajectory of the development of purpose, usually the first thing people stumble upon is, oh, this is really meaningful to me. I find enjoyment. It's something I care about. Usually that's one of the first things people find out. And then they find those goals, and then oftentimes it's the beyond the self component that comes last. So, but not always. So hopefully you can think for yourself about things that might be purposeful to you, or you might want to be purposeful. Let's also have some delineation between meaning and purpose here. So meaning is part of this definition of purpose. I'm thinking of the book Man's Search for Meaning by Viktor Frankl. So if you've ever read that, this was at the beginning of the research on purpose in life. So some of the things he describes are now what we put in the category of meaning, and some of the things he describes are things we put in the category of purpose. But a good example of kind of where the field started as well. So meaning is something that's of personal significance to you. So a walk in the woods could be personally significant. It could be really meaningful. You find a lot of meaning in the woods, but it wouldn't necessarily be a purpose to go on a walk in the woods. You might even have a goal to go and hike so far or to a new waterfall or something like that. But it's not necessarily contributing to the world beyond yourself. Now, something similar might be a purpose towards protecting the environment. If you have a purpose towards protecting the environment, you might do things like go on a walk in the woods, but you also might be doing things like activism or donating to causes, going to protests, talking to people about the environment. You might have long-term and short-term goals around it, around this purpose of protecting the environment. So some short-term goals might be reducing the trash you produce. So day to day, you might have like, should I choose product A or product B? And it might influence that, but it also might influence long term. I want to get this specific training or get involved with this organization or XYZ. So with a purpose, you have those long and short term goals. It's meaningful to you. It might direct a lot of your everyday behavior, but it also contributes to things outside yourself, whether this is like the planet, animals, generally it's other people. For most purposes, but also with our description of religious purpose, it can be like a deity as well. It can be seen as that self-transcendent piece. So questions around purpose as I go into the benefits. So when we're talking about purpose, people who have found a purpose in life, they tend to have these kinds of benefits. So a lot of the research is done in adolescence and early adulthood. So it helps people in their identity development. When on their search for identity, usually people in their search for identity, they also then, after they've kind of come to their identity or at the same time, also are finding a purpose. So that tends to be the natural trajectory of how we see that. Also, it makes academic experience more meaningful. So let's say you have a purpose to help animals, and so you're wanting to train to be a vet. Maybe today you have to go to a chemistry class, and you hate your chemistry class. It's really hard for you. Well, having that purpose and knowing that, well, chemistry will impact my schooling and understanding to help animals, being able to tie those things together will make those experiences more meaningful to you. It also often helps foster connections with other people, especially that beyond the self component. So whether it's helping the environment, you might get involved with groups that are also helping the environment. If it's your family, well, a purpose in family is really fostering that connection with other people in that family. Oftentimes, if it's a religious belief that is the center of your purpose, you'll probably have a community of other people who believe similarly too. So as you're doing these things, reaching those goals, taking steps towards doing things for your purpose, you'll be building self-efficacy. You'll see that you've gained skills, you'll gain new abilities. So it's really highly correlated. And all those together are very highly correlated with greater positive affect. So people with purpose report generally feeling better just in their day-to-day lives. So more happy feelings, things like that. And then also resilience. When you have a purpose in life, you're more likely to be able to bounce back easily from challenges. So yeah, when you have a purpose in life, and let's say it's to help animals, to support the environment, if you see a setback, you still have those long-term as well as short-term goals that can help be resilient. It's also probably help foster connections with other people, so you can rely on them within your context. So purpose can be really helpful. But with that being said, only about 20% of high school students have purpose, and only about 30% of college students have purpose on average. And so this was an older study, but the studies since then have really lined up with that. That only about in high school ages, we see only about 1 in 5 people have purpose. And then once we get to even into middle adulthood, only about 1 in 3 people have a purpose in life. So they have these positive benefits. So building that purpose in life, finding a purpose in life can really give a lot of positive benefits. And again, it's really individual. So it's not like I can say, or any therapist can say, hey, your purpose in life should be X, Y, or Z. There's a bunch of different avenues that you could find purpose in. And so essentially find it, and it'll help your life be even better. So it's one aspect of human thriving that positive psychologists work on a lot. So I do have an extra credit set of activities that I'll talk about that could help you get to that path to purpose. And maybe right now would be a good time to share that before we talk about careers and work and then jump into chapter 11. So let's do that now. I'll make sure I'm recording, because you could refer back to this for this extra credit assignment. All right. In previous classes, I actually had this as, when it was a fully online class, it was a required activity. But for our class, especially with the time we have cramped for Unit 3, I'm going to make it an optional activity, but you can get extra credit points for this. So am I sharing? Yes. All right, so here in Canvas, you will see now under Unit Exam 3, there's a new little block, and you will see this Student Activity Early Adulthood Instructions. So take a look at those instructions, and it'll describe two different activities, one around purpose in life, and another around another topic we'll get to in Chapter 12 of intimacy in early adulthood friendships and why that's important. So this first activity is purpose in life activities, and it's all around the subject of purpose that we've been talking about. The second one is essentially your book really skips over how important friendships can be in early and honestly all adulthood. But intimacy in those friendships is one aspect that's been researched heavily, but your book really just totally avoids. Your book focuses on like dating relationships, cohabitating, marriage relationships, but completely ignores friendships in early adulthood. So this is a way to get more of that information. So if you turn in the first activity on purpose, you'll get 10 points of extra credit. If you turn in the second activity, you'll get 10 points of extra credit. Or you can do both of them for a total of 20 points of extra credit. So the first one, honestly, you'll just follow the instructions here. The first thing will be watching this video that me and a team of researchers made to probably better describe purpose than I just did, even though you'll see some similarities. And then you'll go to this link. You'll do one of these two activities right here, and it's also spelled out here. Don't do these two, do these two. And then do a final choose any of these. So one of these two, and then one of these 5. And that should help you get a better sense of your purpose in life. Outside of class, you could do any of these activities. Each individual activity has been shown to be effective at increasing purpose a little bit, but the best thing is to go through essentially all of them in series, all of the ones on this page. So this is just kind of a test to get a sense of your purpose. So after you do that video and those activities, send me a screenshot of the final page on these activities. Essentially, any of these activities that you do, let's make sure that one's working. So you'll go through this, and when you get to the very end, it should let me skip. Nope, it's not going to. Nope. At the end, it says, you've completed this activity. Send me those screenshots and email them to me, and that's how you'll get your points for the purpose activity. So for that first one, for the purpose activity, do the video, do those 2 activities, send me an email with a screenshot showing you've completed it. For the second one, it's a little bit different. The second one here, I've got 2 different options. One is a video on intimacy in early adulthood friendships, and another is a research article. So the research article is already attached here in Canvas. So choose either that video or the research article. You could do both. And then essentially you watch that video or you read the article. Let me double check that the video is still up, actually. I didn't check that earlier. Yep, it's here. So either do the video or read the abstract, intro, and discussion of that paper, and then essentially write me a response telling me what you've learned from that. So where are the instructions? So that response is pretty short, 200 to 300 words. I'm not grading it for like correct grammar or APA citations or things like that. I'm basically just checking to make sure you did actually watch the video or read the article. So I'll be able to tell from what you say there. So if you do one of those activities, 10 points. If you do both of those activities, 20 extra credit points. So that's like 2 chapter quizzes essentially. And gives you a little more additional information outside of what's in the book. Honestly, I think the chapter 12 one, even though I created the activities with my team for purpose, and purpose can be really useful, I feel like with the content that we're getting in the class from the book, the intimacy and friendships in early adulthood is it's a really big oversight to be out of the book. So maybe the most important one to do. All right, so questions about that extra credit or what you're supposed to do? Again, you'll find it here in Canvas. Go through the instructions for each of them, and then for purpose, send me an email with those screenshots. For the relationships, send me the paper. If you're going to do both, it would be helpful to get both of those things in one email. That'll just make it a little easier for me. All right. There's no questions on that. Let's take a quick break and then we'll come back and we will talk about careers and work, and then we'll be getting into socio-emotional development and chapter 12 before the end of the day today. So let's take a quick break. Be back at 10:40. All right, and we are back. So let's finish up with chapter 11 and talk about careers and work. So some of the examples that we've talked about today are already getting at some of this. But work is a big context for a lot of people in early adulthood. A lot of relationships, so friendships or acquaintanceships, happen through work. So it's a place where a lot of people spend a lot of time. So it's also related to your socioeconomic status, so your financial standing, your housing, and your free time as well. On average, early adults are spending about 47 hours a week at work, and honestly, that's just a lot, way too much. So with that, that's the average. If we think of the normal distribution, which is basically how this lines up, is in a normal distribution, there's people who are spending less than that and people spending a lot more than that as well. Also depends how many jobs you're working and things like that. So with all that together, on average, early adults are spending 47 hours a week at work. It's really interesting considering a lot of research shows that people don't really improve their performance or productivity after about 20 or 30 hours a week at work. So we're just working people for no benefit to keep them as wage slaves. Let's not go too down that rabbit hole in this class, though. So long-term employment prospects for early adults are disappearing on average. So this might be something that you've seen and experienced, something that maybe you had as a goal for a career. Now, rather than being a long-term career, there's gig work around that, for example, or you might have to take multiple jobs to kind of job craft for yourself this kind of long-term type of career. Another example of this, a personal example, is a lot of um, faculty positions at universities. Over 50% at most universities now. Some universities, as much as 80% of the faculty are adjunct faculty. And that's essentially, that's what I am, contracted for a semester to teach a certain number of courses. Essentially doing almost all the same work as a full professor, but without a lot of the benefits and job security of a full professor. So this is happening not just in academia, this is happening in lots of different kinds of fields. Something you've probably experienced, so sorry to talk about it, because these things do lead to a lot of stress. This is one reason it's important to talk about, because we do have research. There are researchers working on it, trying to do applied work to fix these kinds of problems. But yeah, talking about it does lead to stress, and experiencing it leads to stress. So most workers in general, especially early adults, want more control, more flexibility with their time, their goals, the products or ideas that they're creating. They want more control and flexibility with those things and to be able to set their own goals. There's a whole field of psychology, industrial organizational psychology, that works to figure out how best can we meet needs of actual humans within the context that we work in. So how can we help managers and workers, or doctors and nurses, work together? How can we set up job environments and an actual workplace down to like actual seating in ways that are good for human development? It can also be used to look at how to increase productivity and health in employees. So this is an area that my wife actually got a degree in, so she knows a lot more about this. I might have her do record even a little module to get some practice teaching for this section. Might actually be a really good idea. So, but yeah, there's a whole field of psychology that works on that as well. It does a lot of applied research. Industrial organizational psychology, if that's something you might be interested in. So, unemployment. Unemployment is incredibly stressful as well. It's correlated with a lot of health problems: heart attack, stroke, depression, anxiety, marital difficulties. So with it, it affects so many contexts in your life. For example, here, just in this little model, you have a work network that is a bubble here and has a bidirectional interaction. This would be a solid line for an adult rather than a child. This is like the work network of their parents. But for you, an adult, this would be a solid double sided line. But then if that's gone, Some of your network might now be gone. Some of your connections, your acquaintances might be gone. Some of your friends from that work might still be there and you might still have contact with them, but this might change your contacts. You might have to move to a new place, a new community, trying to find a new job. So unemployment can have a lot of different impacts. So there is research on how to cope with unemployment. And with all this stressful talk, let's look at a piece of research and a finding that I think is kind of hilarious, and we'll talk about why. It's kind of dark as well, but this was in the discussion of a paper on unemployment. Individuals who cope best with unemployment have financial resources to rely on, savings, or the earnings of other family members. So basically, the findings of this paper were that people who cope best when they're unemployed are people who have money or families with money. So this is one of those examples of the research shows exactly what everybody already knew and assumed. So, but that being said, it's good to do good research on things because sometimes our assumptions have turned out to be false. So it is important, and I know I'm making fun of this finding, but it is important we do research even to find findings like this, because in some cases our assumptions aren't correct, and it's really good to figure that out. Yeah, I do think it's kind of a funny finding. Yeah, people who do best when they're unemployed are people who have money. So a little funny, maybe a little levity with the stress of this conversation as well. But some other things that are maybe a little more helpful to support people who are unemployed. Emotional support is very useful. So family members, friends, emotional support can be very helpful. Adaptable family members, so family members who are able to maybe financially adapt for one and give a little more support if needed, or also support and maybe take children for childcare at different times, things like that. Job counseling, so this includes counseling for like searching for jobs, resume writing, or interview skills. Job counseling for like building networks is also really useful too. I forget the stats. I should probably ask my wife, what are the stats on like how many jobs come out of a person's network, because most jobs tend to be that way, like found through a network of people. Self-help groups can also help. You might not have even realized that there are self-help groups for people who are unemployed. So these can all be effective helpers and supports. So this also brings us to dual earner couples. That was harder to say quick than I thought it would be. So this is a unique context that has been more prevalent and much more necessary in recent decades as well. So whereas in, let's say 40 years ago, dual earner couples, it wasn't necessarily a necessity, but that people could choose to have both partners work out of the home. Now it's a lot more necessary to be a thing. So this leads to difficult work-life balance. Children add to that difficulty as well. So if you both have to be out of the house from 9 to 5 and there's a 3-year-old in the house who's before preschool age, where are you getting childcare from? Is it even worth it to get childcare when it's costs X amount of money? These kinds of things add to that difficulty. Egalitarian partnerships are the best. So when responsibilities at home and at work, so financial responsibilities, tasks at home, like putting away dishes, doing laundry, when those things are shared equally, leads to best outcomes. Up to even recently, research showed that most partnerships still, it's the women in a partnership still doing the majority of the household tasks. So rather than being perfectly egalitarian, if both partners are working, the woman tends to be still doing more of the housework, even if they are earning more money. I just broke my pen. I did see an abstract the other day that might suggest that more recently this might have changed, but I actually have to read that paper before I make any claims based on that. But it looks like maybe in recent years, like the last 5 or so, egalitarian partnerships might have actually reached egalitarian in shared responsibilities. But again, I've only read the abstract. I haven't checked over their methods to see if it's a good valid study or who it can generalize to, because it might be a really small sample or a very specific sample. So up to now, we still see women doing the majority of the household tasks, even if they are the person earning more money in the household. So with this, planning is really essential to success for dual earner couples, figuring out how that childcare will work, who's going to drop them off, pick them up, things like that, for example. So that is the end of chapter 11 material. We're jumping into chapter 12. As we jump into chapter 12, just a reminder that we're going to finish up chapter 12 on Thursday, and then Friday, your exam will open. So your study guide is up currently on Canvas, so you can get that here and start working on that study guide now. So definitely come to class on Thursday having looked over that study guide so you can ask questions, and we'll get a little prepped for the exam, which again will be open Friday and Saturday. So if you already know you're going to be out of town for something, I can open it up early for you, even answer a question or two on the study guide. So just let me know. Yeah, that's all I wanted to say about the exam right now. We'll go over it in more detail on Thursday. All right, so chapter 12 is kind of short in comparison to other chapters in the textbook. And I think a lot of that is because it does focus so much on just partner relationships in early adulthood. And it does, like I mentioned earlier, really completely ignore intimate friendships as well. So let's talk a little bit about attachment styles and how they affect adult attachment styles, something that we've mentioned before, and then talk about the triangle theory of love, or triarchic theory of love. So the key here is in early childhood, our caregiver tends to be a person that we rely on a lot. As we get into adulthood and we have, say, a partner, that person tends to be a person we rely on a lot. And so in a lot of ways, they fulfill some of the same roles as that person we were attached to in childhood. So like supporting, being a secure base, those kinds of things. So in childhood, secure attachment is seen in a secure caregiver-child relationship. There's trust, there's warmth. So in an adult, a secure attachment style between partners, they will tend to have positive views of relationships. They will find it easy to get close to others and build a relationship. So, and that relationship then, if it's securely attached, they'll be able to count on their partner to be a secure base. Let's say they want to try a new hobby or change their career. The partner will be a secure place to do that, to come back to, get reassurance, get support for doing that new thing, and then comfort them and be secure, a security place for them. So this is how we see some of the similarities from attachment style in childhood leading to an attachment style in adulthood, early adulthood, as well as middle adulthood. So I think you might be able to imagine like a person's life, how this might happen. So if you expect a close relationship to be someone that is a secure base and offers comfort and security and can be relied on, this is the kind of thing you will look for in a relationship when you're, say, dating. You'll look for someone who will be a secure base, who you can rely on. And this is one of the ways that this attachment style continues on into romantic relationships or even friendships as well. So let's go over child avoidant attachment. So avoidant attachment in childhood usually is when a parent is emotionally unresponsive or even rejective. So the child learns to avoid that closeness even if they want that closeness. And so you might be able to remember back to our discussions of the strange situation, some specific behaviors you might see from that child. But in adult avoidant attachment style, that partner will tend to be hesitant about getting involved in romantic relationship. They might, if there's some kind of misunderstanding or an argument or even something that a partner does that's not good, they become distant from the partner more easily. So even though they might want that closeness, if they're avoidantly attached, they might expect or be rejective to that relationship more easily than someone who's, say, securely attached. So you can kind of see this as well. This is one reason that people who are securely attached tend to end up together, or avoidantly attached tend to end up together, because that's how they expect a relationship to kind of line up with, and so ends up being who they find, because it's kind of a self-fulfilling prophecy in that way. That's what they're expecting, that's what they're searching for, that's what they end up finding. So that being said, it's only about 75% of people who keep their same attachment style throughout childhood and adulthood. So some people by this time have changed their attachment style for a variety of reasons. Another way to change attachment style, where it generally happens just normally on the trajectory of life, is at this time in early adulthood with relationships. So if someone who is avoidantly attached gets in a relationship with someone who's securely attached, either of them can change to the other attachment style. But most often, it's the person who's avoidantly attached changes to secure attachment. Once they realize that they can rely on that partner as a secure base, as someone to come back to, that they don't have to become distant when things happen, they'll start to change their attachment style to secure. And they might keep that attachment style the whole rest of their life. All right, but we still got one more to go. So child anxious attachment. In childhood, this looks nervous and stressed about a relationship. They don't think that they can rely on that person. They need constant reassurance and affection to feel that they're close to them. They have trouble being alone, and they have trouble trusting people. I think with these descriptions, it might be easy to imagine an adult relationship in a similar way. So an adult partner relationship. So an anxious avoidant or an anxious attachment style in adulthood is that person will tend to demand closeness, but also be less trusting, be more emotional, jealous, more possessive. So this is what we would see from an anxious adult attachment style. So you might be able to think of maybe people in your own life who might match up to these attachment styles. I think it's maybe easier as well to think of in movies that might match up with these attachment styles, because especially since those characters are played to be like more obvious or extreme in these ways. So hopefully you can think of either people or characters that you've seen in your own life that kind of match up with either a anxious adult attachment style, avoidant attachment, or secure attachment style. So I've mentioned that one of the most common ways people change their attachment style is by entering into a relationship in early adulthood with someone with another attachment style. That tends to be just normally the most common, but this can be something people work on their own. So if you know that you have, say, an avoidant, or if you suspect you have an avoidant attachment style, you find that it is easy for you to become more distant and not rely on that partner, or you feel like you might have an anxious attachment style, you feel like you might be more jealous or possessive than is actually necessarily in a relationship, you could work on that, like specifically getting a therapist and working on those kinds of specific skills, telling them that maybe you think that you don't have a secure attachment style. There's things that they can help you work on, skills that they can help you do, so you can change that yourself. You don't have to find someone with a secure attachment style to change your attachment style. That just tends to be just in natural development, what we tend to see be one of the key points of change there. But yeah, this is something that you can work on if it's something that you want to work on. Getting support from a therapist is definitely recommended as well, to give you specific kind of goals and tools to work on to improve these things. So, all right. And we've talked about the definition of intimacy before, and it's really important for our discussion of the triarchic theory of love. So intimacy, that's self-disclosure, sharing of private thoughts. I feel like I need a cough drop. Sorry. So with this, Erikson thought that this stage in early adulthood for socio-emotional development was all about intimacy versus isolation. And so essentially, you found someone, generally it was thought of to be a partner. You found someone to be intimate with, to share yourself, to lose yourself, or find yourself while losing yourself in another person. And so you either got to that point, you got to that intimacy point, or you were isolated, and it would stay that way the rest of your life unless you found intimacy. Social relationships and intimate friendships are really important for our mental health, for sure, but it doesn't mean if you don't have those kinds of close relationships right now that you're doomed in all aspects of your life. So a lot of the the kind of extreme claims from some of the original researchers like Erikson were a little overblown or over-exaggerated. But then we had to do research to figure out where they might be right and where they might be wrong. So it wasn't necessarily bad, just early research. So the idea was that you had to find that balance between intimacy and commitment, between freedom and independence, and having someone that you could share yourself with. Again, Erikson thought that either happened or you were kind of doomed for a little bit later trajectory, which it's not that big of a crisis. Is correlated with positive and negative things versus if you have intimate friendships versus not, but yeah, it's not so extreme. All right, so that is the area of intimacy on this triarchic theory of love. So let's talk about this theory and the different components of it and talk about all the different kinds of love we can experience in our lives. So each of these points, intimacy, that's a type of love in Sternberg's triarchic theory of love. Romantic love is, consummate love, passion is a type of love, commitment is a type of love. So each of these is a type of love, and it depends on the kind of relationship that you have or want with someone, and that you might want all or some of these things. So let's talk about them. We talked about intimacy. So the three key dimensions, the word's right there. I don't know why I couldn't say dimensions. The three key dimensions are intimacy, passion, and commitment. And so each of those individually are their own type of love, but putting them together with other things make new other types of love too. So passion. This is physical and sexual attraction. So you want to physically be with someone, that's passion in this definition. Intimacy, the feelings of warmth that come from that self-disclosure, people disclosing about themselves, that closeness, that's intimacy. And then commitment is, and this is more like the definition of it to make it really clear. So it's an intent to maintain the relationship even if problems occur. The idea that you will be there for the person and they will be there for you. So that can display in a lot of different ways. So the intimacy, sharing of yourself, passion, sexual attraction, and commitment, being committed to that relationship. And commitment can display, again, in a lot of different ways. So can intimacy. Passion's pretty one note with the physical or sexual attraction. So here we've got intimacy. You might have, for example, an intimate love with, say, a close friend or a family member, maybe a sibling that you share a lot with them. Maybe you don't see them very often, maybe they're really long distance away, but maybe you've shared a lot of things with them in their life, or you still do, and they share a lot with you. Maybe you have a really intimate relationship. You might say you love that person. That's an example of just intimacy alone. Passion's something that we often see, actually intimacy and passion. Oftentimes a rom-com will start with one of those, and the whole movie is kind of going through the funny or hard things to add the other component to get to romantic love. So you might have two people in a rom-com meet each other, and there's a lot of passion, there's a lot of sexual attraction, and then the whole movie is basically them figuring out how to actually be intimate with each other, share about themselves. Or it might be vice versa. Other rom-coms are starting with that intimacy. You've got two really good friends who are sharing a lot about each other. They know everything about each other. And then one develops the sexual attraction to the other. And the whole thing is seeing if the other person has that sexual attraction or trying to inspire that in them. Rom-coms are pretty fun. I like them. But really good examples of intimacy, passion, and then kind of the end goal of the rom-com. It generally ends when they get to that intimacy and passion together, and that is called, in Sternberg's triarchic theory, that's called romantic love. So that's generally the end of a rom-com. Sometimes the end adds commitment or tries to get to consummate love, but we'll get to that in a minute. So, I guess we'll get to that now. I have that in the middle. So consummate love is here in the middle. It's adding that intimacy, passion, and commitment together. So consummate love is defined as the strongest, fullest form of love with passion, intimacy, and commitment. So the kinds of relationships you would want a consummate love to be with is, say, a partner. So a long-term partner, a marriage partner, something like that. You would want to be sharing things about yourself. You would want to have that sexual attraction, and you'd want to be committed to that person. So in this kind of context, that might be marriage, for example, would be one example of that commitment. You're going to be there. Maybe it could even be a cohabitating relationship when you're not actually married, but you have a long-term commitment. You decide together, are you sharing bills or not, putting each other on your taxes, those kinds of things. Having children, that's a huge commitment, obviously, as well. So consummate love is putting all three of those things together, the intimacy, the passion, and the commitment. And so if you went to, say, a marriage and family therapist with a partner to try and work on your relationship, you might be able to use this model, or they might be able to use this model to try and figure out, well, what's missing in this relationship? Are you still really committed and passionate, but maybe you don't have intimacy right now? Well, then they might work on that. Or maybe there's passion and intimacy, but a lack of commitment, and they might work on that. Or maybe passion is the thing that's lacking in this relationship. So trying to essentially assess where this couple is. Is this couple closer to here? Are they here? Are they here? Here? And trying to bring them to that consummate love. So hopefully now you have a good understanding of that intimacy, commitment, and passion, and put those together is this consummate love. And generally, we're looking for that for like a long-term partner relationship. But that doesn't mean the other types of love are less important or less valid or less valuable. So let's talk about infatuation. So this is where you have passion, but no intimacy and commitment. So that's another name for just having passion alone. So you're infatuated. So affectionate love or companionate love is a combination of intimacy and commitment, but no passion. So intimacy plus commitment is companionate love. You've got this intimacy, you're sharing a lot about yourself, and you're committed to this person. You'll be there for them, they'll be there for you. So you might imagine probably a lot of relationships that you have, you probably want this companionate love. Maybe a close friend or a family member, maybe parents or something like that. These might be relationships where you would want a companionate love with. You would want to be able to share with that person things about yourself. You would want them to share with you. You would want to be committed. You would want them to know that you can, or they can rely on you, and you'd want to be able to be there for them. So a lot of different relationships would fall under companionate love. So a sibling, close friends. So when we're talking about that research study that I put for one of the extra credit things, it's talking specifically on building intimacy and also related to building this companionate love. Although I don't think they actually refer to the triarchic theory of love there. I think they're just focusing specifically on intimacy in that paper. But here I'm showing you like this is where it fits in. So a lot of your relationships in life should probably be this companionate love, or you probably would want them to be. So with that, you can take stock of any relationship you have, maybe with your close friend that has been your close friend for a long time. Maybe you need to think about, are you missing commitment with that person? Are you missing intimacy with that person? Things like that. And you can work on those things. That's why I think this model is really useful. You can kind of pinpoint, oh, I'm missing this in this relationship, so I should work on this if that's something you want to do. So fatuous love is passion and commitment without intimacy. And you might say, well, why would you have sexual attraction and be committed to somebody but not be intimate with them, like sharing things about yourself? One really good example of this is people who make a really big commitment really quickly in a relationship. So let's say people who get married very quickly would be an example of this. Maybe they have a lot of passion, a lot of sexual attraction to each other. They decide to make this commitment. They decide to be committed to each other or even have a child or something like that, but they haven't really got to know each other well. That might be one example of fatuous love. So I think we've gone through each of these now. So hopefully you can think of in your own life, I mean, hopefully you can think of in your own life people who are good models of consummate and companionate love. Maybe not fatuous love, but you could hopefully think of maybe characters who might be examples of fatuous love in, say, movies or that you've seen. So hopefully it's a little clear on these. So are there questions, though, on what would, like, this relationship, where would that fall or that fall? Maybe character relationships, if you're a little unclear on these. Any questions at all about it? So if there's not, maybe we won't even watch this video, but this is a review of this triarchic theory of love, and essentially goes over the same things I've just gone over, but it also has some other examples that I might not have covered. So it's mostly a review. So probably watch this if you're still confused at all, or if you need to review before the exam to get some more of these examples. This would be a good thing to watch, but it's really repetitive of what I've just shared. So let's go a little farther for the end of class, or before the end of class. So cross-cultural variations in romantic relationships. So when we're talking about romantic relationships and the beginnings of romantic relationships, often we're talking about like the intimacy and passion starting up, leading to romantic love and going to consummate love. So that's generally like in a dating kind of relationship with a potential partner. What we're talking about is building this intimacy, passion, and commitment together at different times. So for example, you've probably seen rom-coms where there's a friend, a couple friends who are very much good examples of companionate love. And so maybe it's intimacy and commitment, and then over the course of the movie, they build passion with each other. So they've got these two, and now they've moved over to consummate love. So with that, in cross-cultural variations exist. So in collectivist countries, intimacy, so that sharing of yourself, sharing of things that are important to you, that is more spread out to more people in the community. And this shows a lot of positive benefits actually too, is being more intimate and having that intimacy piece of this triarchic theory, having that not exclusively for just someone with consummate love, but spreading that out to other friends or even people in the community can show a lot of positive benefits. Individualistic countries, the intimacy tends to be for smaller groups, so only sharing that with maybe your couple closest, so only sharing things about yourself with your couple closest friends. So this tends to be like my experience, because I've grown up in an individualistic country. Only sharing that intimacy with people really close to you, like a small group of people. So that's one difference across cultures. Also tends to be higher interest in more passion and more self-disclosure in romantic relationships, like dating relationships. So let's jump to early adult lifestyles. So in 2016, about 45% of adults 18 and over were single. So with this includes not being married, not cohabitating. So single, and like they might be dating, they might even have a long-term partner, but if they're not cohabitating and not married, or if either or, if they're not cohabitating, if they're not married, they would be classified as single in this study. So it can be a challenge to be single. So society the US especially, is very marriage oriented. So it can be lonely. I imagine for people who were single during the pandemic, it's incredibly difficult, especially. Challenges forming intimate relationships. So especially in this individualistic culture we're in here, adding on that intimacy to new friendships or new potential dating relationships can be really hard for people here in Western countries. So getting that intimacy piece in relationships can be pretty difficult. So single adults do have some benefits though. Here we have a character from How I Met Your Mother with a great quote that kind of describes their the trajectory of the first couple seasons anyway. So more time to make decisions about life, autonomous decision making is not having to deliberate with someone else and decide which car to buy, for example. Otherwise, I probably would have ended up with a black car, but I actually really like the blue one. So more time to pursue your own interests, more opportunities to travel, more privacy. These are things that people say that people report as benefits of being single. So with this, the dating landscape for early adults right now, about 40% of people who are dating met that person online. So in a lot of different ways, whether it be just like general social media networking or actually like a dating website or something like Tinder. So a lot of, so 24% met through a friend, and then 48% have sex before the first actual date. So, which is a stat that I was actually pretty surprised by. So millennials, it seems, want to know as much as possible before committing in any way to a serious relationship. Is one way the dating landscape has changed for early adults more recently versus decades ago. So this kind of thing, again, from How I Met Your Mother, with, oh goodness, why can I not remember the characters' names right now? I know that's Robin. Yeah, the last one was Barney. Ted Mosby. It's like the main character of the show. Why could I not remember that? My wife is making commentary from back here. She says, because I don't like him. Yeah, I don't like Ted. Ted's not a great character, not a great person in most of the show. Don't fight me. So with this, though, this is not a common thing for Ted in the first date with Robin, tells Robin that he's in love with her, and that's literally the entire show. Ted and Robin. I get kind of sick of it like halfway through and stop watching for like a year, then come back and finally finish the series whenever I rewatch it. Anyway, cohabitating. So it's more common now. So this is living together and in sexual relationships without marriage. The rates in the US of cohabitating are rising. Usually this is a lifestyle in and of itself. It's not necessarily a precursor to marriage. So if you know a partnership who is cohabitating, on average, most of them are not thinking of marriage as like an end goal or as like a test for marriage. So this comic is funny, but not super relevant to what actually we are seeing right now. So cohabitating is usually like an end goal for early adults right now, that rather than being married and having that commitment, they're living together in a long-term partnership. It might even last literally decades and decades, longer than many marriages. So, but with that being said, it is rare for these to last more than 5 years on average again. And there's mixed results about cohabitating and then marrying being positive or negative. So in the past, research was showing that people who cohabitated before marriage had a higher rate of divorce. Now it's pretty clear that there's a lot of other variables, that cohabitating before marriage isn't a net positive or a net negative for them being married. So it's good to know for anybody who's thinking of cohabitating and then maybe marrying in the future, that person. So I think that's a good place. I mean, we're still talking about lifestyles and marriage, but I think that's a good place to pause right now after talking about single adulthood and cohabitating, with this being so close to the end of class. So definitely we will get through chapter 12 next time for sure and have time to go over the study guide. So please do go over the study guide yourself. Maybe even email me some questions before class so we can make sure we go through those on the study guide. Otherwise, we'll just go through the study guide a little bit generally before the exam this weekend. So thanks for being here today. Have a great rest of your day.